Hello everyone, I welcome you all to the monthly current affairs roundup session where we'll look into some of the most important issues of the month gone by. So let's begin with the important issues with respect to General Studies Paper 2. The first issue in news is the Dam Safety Bill, which has been recently approved by the Union Cabinet. The bill aims at setting up a national dam safety authority which will coordinate with the state level dam safety organizations and the owners of the dams for standardizing safety related data and practices. In this regard, the National Dam Safety Authority will investigate dam failures and will have the authority to find the states which fail in implementing safety measures. It will further look into unresolved conflicts between the states which share dam territory and look into eliminating potential causes for such interstate conflicts. The bill is important because there are many cases like the Mullaperiyar Dam in Kerala, which is contested between Kerala and Tamil Nadu, and also due to lack of legal and institutional architecture of dam safety. Events like the Chennai floods of 2015 were compounded by an unprecedented release of water from the Chembarambakkam Dam in Adyar. Therefore, such issues can be effectively addressed by putting in place an institutional mechanism which the current bill aims to achieve. On that note, let's move on to the next issue, which was regarding rural electrification. As you are aware, the central government had recently claimed 100% electrification of India, but now it has said that while it is the center's responsibility to connect households and villages to the power grid, it cannot guarantee the supply of electricity to them, and the actual supply of electricity is the responsibility of the power distribution companies in each state. Given the center's claim of 100% electrification of villages and also its assurance that all households will be electrified by this year end, it was found that in some cases the electrification infrastructure such as the cables and the transformers were stolen just days after they were installed, thereby leaving the target village unelectrified. In other cases, electricity was just supplied for a few hours a day, despite the government saying that India is a power surplus nation. Adding to this, almost every state in the country experiences power cuts, especially during the peak summer season. The reason for this, as explained by various power sector analysts, is because the discoms at the state level are very inefficient, thereby creating a mismatch between the transmission costs and the revenue realized. This is the case with most discoms, even with schemes like the Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana, which was launched to bring down the discom losses. Therefore, in order to improve the performance of these discoms, the state governments should give financial support and assurances so that the necessary infrastructure for the supply of good quality power on a sustainable basis, as well as the financial health of the discoms, improves to realize the goal of 24/7 uninterrupted power supply. On that note, let's move on to the next issue, which is about the draft Higher Education Commission of India bill to be brought in by the government to scrap the University Grants Commission and set up the Higher Education Commission of India, empowered with some of the functions of the UGC. According to the draft bill, the proposed commission will be given powers to ensure academic quality, and the funding powers which the UGC enjoyed will not be awarded to the HECI. The Ministry of Human Resource Development or any other mechanism which will be put in place later will be responsible for funding universities and colleges, and the proposed commission will differ from the UGC in several aspects, like the UGC used to conduct inspections to assess institutions, but this practice will be done away with in order to shift to a regime of transparent disclosures by the institution itself. Then, the UGC used to publish lists of bogus institutions, but the proposed commission will be empowered to even shut down substandard institutions, thereby empowering it to comply with academic quality standards. The next issue in news is regarding the controversy over organ transplants in the state of Tamil Nadu. Chennai is known for its health infrastructure and is also termed as the health capital of India due to its potential in promoting health tourism and the ecosystem it offers for various health interventions. Among this, transplantation of human organs like the kidney, liver, heart, etc. is one of the services offered, and the state governments, which have the responsibility for healthcare, are expected to ensure that the organs, which are altruistically donated by the families of the brain dead people, are given to the rightful recipients ethically as mandated by the law. And in this regard, the transplantation of human organs and tissue rules clearly states that priority should be given to the citizens enrolled in the state and national waiting lists over the foreign nationals. The recent controversy is regarding the implementation of this rule, where, according to a report, it was found that in 2017, foreigners accounted for 25% of the heart and 33% of the lung transplants, thereby showing that preferential allotment of these organs have been made to foreign patients in Tamil Nadu. In this regard, an inquiry should be launched to find out whether the registered citizens were overlooked in order to allocate organs for the foreigners, and the inquiry should also cover issues such as the capacity of the district level hospitals to perform transplants and arrange for the necessary logistics like the airlift of organs, since domestic patients may be unable to afford such facilities. Also, every effort should be made to ensure that organs go to the most suitable recipients according to the rule-based parameters of domicile, citizenship, Indian origin, and foreign nationality in the particular order of preference set by the rules. And nothing should be done to erode the confidence of the relatives of the brain dead people who donate organs with no expectation of gain, while at the same time removing hospitals and professionals who engage in commercial or unethical behavior. On that note, let's move on to the next issue, which is regarding the United Nations State of Food Security and Nutrition report. The report states that the gains achieved on food security and better nutrition since the beginning of this century may be at risk because the reduction seen in the rate of undernourishment since the year 2000 has registered a worrying increase in the year 2016. Adding to this is the finding that deprivation is even greater among people who live in regions affected by conflict and extreme effects of climate change. Further, the report says that in spite of the child undernutrition rates continuing to drop, there is still 1 in 4 children who is affected by stunting, which is the value of height to age of the child. Although these averages do not reflect the disparities among regions, within countries, and between states, they represent a setback to all countries which are trying to meet the Sustainable Development Goal on ending hunger and achieving food security and improved nutrition. With respect to India, as we know, efforts have been made through progressive legislations like the National Food Security Act to improve access to food and good nutrition, and various states operate their own special nutrition schemes for women and children. In spite of such interventions, around 14.5% of the population suffers from undernourishment, according to the report, and at the national level, 53% of the women are anemic, as per the data of the Health Ministry. Further, institutions such as the state food commissions and the public distribution system have not made a big difference, as distributing nutritious food as a public health measure is still not a political imperative. In this regard, the recent report on nutritional deficiency should serve as an opportunity to evaluate the role of the PDS in bringing about dietary diversity for those relying on subsidized food in shaping household and nutritional security. Given the finding of the Niti Aayog that the families below the poverty line consume more cereals and less milk when compared to their richer counterparts, the goal should be complementing rice and wheat with more nutritious food items. The next worrisome issue was regarding the various incidents of mob lynching across the country. Recently, two men in Uttar Pradesh were lynched based on rumors that cow smuggling was taking place. While this may be a case of cow vigilantism, there were other incidents of violence in states like Tamil Nadu and Assam in the northeast, where men and women have been lynched based on suspicion that they were trying to kidnap children. In many of these cases, including the ones in Tamil Nadu and Assam, such public concern was created or heightened by warnings that were circulated on social media. Irrespective of whether these lynchings were carried out due to the fear of kidnappings or were deliberate acts of cow vigilantism, the authorities should not treat the crime of murder and mob violence as the same, because mob violence takes an extraordinary toll on the civilities of the wider society, and therefore the police must make it clear that murder and mob violence will be dealt with strictly. Also, the administration should address the new challenge of the use of social media, especially platforms like WhatsApp groups, which spread fear and panic. In this regard, responses such as surveillance and internet shutdowns are not only impossible but are also inadvisable in a free society. Therefore, what is needed is the administration should reach out to the local communities in order to check troublemakers and to instill good faith among the individuals in order to uphold peace. On that note, let's move on to the next issue, which is regarding the recent power crisis in National Capital Territory Delhi. The ruling Aam Aadmi Party government in Delhi has a history of confrontation with the centre on the question of who is the administrative head of the region. But the immediate provocation for the recent dharna of the Delhi Chief Minister is due to the tussle with the bureaucracy. The crisis, however, is rooted in the understanding of the constitutional limits of the elected government in the National Capital Territory of Delhi, which, unlike other states, has limited powers in matters of land, police, and law and order. Therefore, since the party came to power in 2015, it has been demanding for the status of a full-fledged state for Delhi, thereby leading to differences between the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi and the elected government there. This is the basic issue, and a question in the mains examination has already been asked on the 69th constitutional amendment, which is regarding the powers of the government of Union Capital Territory of Delhi. What is important to note here is the politics of protest adopted by the Delhi government is putting governance at risk, because instead of mounting a legal challenge to the centre's effort of limiting the powers of the Delhi government, the Delhi Chief Minister has responded politically to the issue, and such dharnas will not address the underlying causes with respect to powers of the Delhi government. The central government also should work jointly with the Delhi government for the welfare of its citizens, and all the stakeholders should learn to make the best of the system before demanding for more autonomy. Now let's look into the important issues from General Studies Paper 3, starting with the recent policy rate hikes by the Monetary Policy Committee of the Reserve Bank of India. This is the first increase in the previous 4.5 years, and it comes at a time when there are numerous uncertainties like the rising inflation, global uncertainties which could affect the emerging markets, like the rising tensions over trade wars initiated by the US government, or the fears of further rate hikes by the Federal Reserve, which could result in exodus of capital from the developing world, particularly from emerging markets like India, which could ultimately affect the rupee value and thereby our trade competitiveness. Therefore, the Monetary Policy Committee, which is driven by an inflation management mandate, has decided to hike the policy rates due to not only the factors we just discussed, but also due to the seasonal food inflation spikes, and also due to the input cost pressures which have increased due to rise in prices of global commodities like fuel. Therefore, if the RBI has to reduce the interest rates in future, the government should work out a viable strategy to minimize the inflation transmission from the rise in global commodities like oil by looking into the taxation policy of the government on commodities like petroleum. An interrelated topic to the first issue is the rising levels of non-performing assets in the banking sector. The Financial Stability Report, which was recently released by the Reserve Bank of India, has warned that the gross non-performing assets of scheduled commercial banks could rise from 11.6% in March 2018 to 12.2% in March 2019, which could be the highest level in almost 2 decades. This is contrary to the hopes of reduction of the NPA crisis, which has affected the banking system and has impeded the credit growth in the economy. Due to this, the RBI believes that there will be an increase in the provisioning for losses, thereby affecting the capital position of these banks. The deteriorating health of these banks is in contrast to the economy, which is on the path of recovery, going by the growth rate of 7.7% during the last quarter. The RBI has also warned about several external risks which could pose a significant threat to the economy as well as the financial health of the banks, like the tightening of monetary policy of the United States, which could result in capital outflow from emerging countries such as India, and also the increase in commodity prices such as crude oil could pose a significant threat to the rupee and the country's fiscal as well as current account deficits. All these factors could combine to increase the risk of an economic slowdown as well as the pressure on the entire banking system, which is already reeling under rising NPAs. Further, the Financial Stability Report highlights the central bank's finding that the public sector banks are more prone to fraud than their private sector counterparts, which is significant in the light of the huge scam which took place at the Punjab National Bank. The RBI further notes that more than 85% of the frauds could be linked to public sector banks, and it is no surprise to anyone given the serious corporate governance issues faced by public sector banks. Therefore, it has highlighted the need for governance reforms to improve the financial performance of these entities as well as reduce their operational risks. In the short term, the RBI expects the government's recapitalization plan as well as the implementation of the insolvency and bankruptcy code to improve the capital position of the banks. But unless the government brings in some drastic changes with regards to operational autonomy and the ownership of PSBs, future crises in the banking sector will be hard to prevent. On that cautionary note, let's look into some of the environmental issues which were in news. The first one regarding the steps needed to counter the plastic menace. As you are all aware, the theme of the World Environment Day, which was held on June 5th, is to beat plastic pollution. And the event was hosted by India, which is one of the major producer of plastic waste. Although there are solid waste management rules as well as plastic waste management rules which are put in place, the enforcement of these rules are still not up to the desired levels, thereby leading to the release of these harmful plastic effluents into the environment, primarily into the seas and oceans. Therefore, it is no surprise that the Ganga Brahmaputra Meghna river system is featured on the UN map of 10 rivers worldwide that collectively carry the bulk of plastic waste into the ocean. This not only threatens the marine life, but studies have shown microplastics are now found even in drinking water. Therefore, voluntary actions like segregating waste, compost at home are commendable initiatives, but a more systematic reform, particularly by the central government, to ensure that the Environment Protection Act is implemented in the letter and spirit, thereby regulating or even stopping the manufacture of single-use plastic articles such as carry bags and encourage the use of biodegradable materials. Further, the state level monitoring committees have to be made accountable so that the local bodies which are mandated under the rules to ensure segregation, collection and transfer of waste to registered recyclers, thereby helping in scientific reprocessing of the plastic waste. The next issue is regarding reports of widespread uranium contamination in groundwater across India. According to a study published in the Environmental Science and Technology Letters, heavy metals have been found in parts of northwestern, southern, and southeastern India. Drinking such water can damage one's kidneys, and unfortunately, the residents of the region surveyed were using the contaminated wells as their main source of drinking water. Even though the World Health Organization prescribes the upper limit for these heavy metals, the Bureau of Indian Standards does not specify the norm for uranium level in waters, and therefore water is not regularly tested for the presence of uranium in it, thereby reflecting a major gap in India's water quality monitoring. This is despite the fact that Evidence of uranium contamination has accumulated from across India over the last decade from different parts of the country like Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Gujarat. The health effects of drinking uranium contaminated water merit special attention because a few studies conducted on small animal and humans have found that heavy metal damages the kidneys of the participants, and it was found that it was the chemical effect rather than the radioactive effect of uranium. But still, the chronic effects of uranium consumption are unknown, and researchers have to look into the problem systematically. Another critical area of research is the mechanism by which uranium enters groundwaters, for which researchers have identified two types of terrains with heavy contamination. Like in Rajasthan and other northwestern regions, uranium occurs mostly in alluvial aquifers, while in the southern regions, such as Telangana, crystalline rocks such as granite seem to be the source. Researchers suggest that when groundwater is over extracted from such sources, uranium is exposed to air, thereby triggering its release. This hypothesis must be further explored on the lines of similar research conducted in West Bengal, which revealed that contaminant arsenic mainly occurred in shallow aquifers. Therefore, there is a need for similar research to be carried out across India in order to determine safe drinking water. Now let's look into some of the important international issues from the examination perspective, beginning with how China gained a strategic foothold in the Indian Ocean region. China had provided loans to the Sri Lankan government for constructing the Hambantota Port, even though many had predicted the failure of the port to attract adequate traffic. Also, it was found during the 2015 Sri Lankan elections that large payments from the Chinese Port Construction Fund flowed directly to the campaigning activities of Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, who was seen as an important ally in China's efforts to tilt influence away from India in the South Asian region. Although Chinese officials have insisted that China's interest in the Hambantota port is purely commercial, Sri Lankan officials have said that intelligence and strategic operations were always part of the negotiations, and in this regard, Indian officials fear that Sri Lanka is struggling to repay the Chinese debt, and therefore, the Chinese government may use this situation to exchange debt relief for the military use of its assets like the Hambantota port, even though the final lease agreement between China and Sri Lanka prohibits military activity without Sri Lanka's invitation. The Hambantota port is evidence to several critics who had criticized the global investment and lending program under the Belt and Road Initiative as a debt trap for vulnerable countries around the world, fueling corruption and autocratic behavior in struggling democracies. The next issue in news is regarding the global trade war due to imposition of tariffs by major economies of the world. The first shot in the spiraling trade war was fired by the US when it imposed tariffs on imports of steel and aluminium into the country, which was countered by similar imposition of tariffs on American goods by China and the European Union. India is the latest to join this battle, which has notified higher tariffs on several items imported from the US, including agricultural products such as apples, almonds, walnuts, etc. The action follows the government's notification to the World Trade Organization last week that it was imposing tariffs in retaliation to the US duty on steel and aluminium imports from India, but it further specifies that these higher tariffs would come into effect by August 4th, thereby leaving room for further discussions between US and India. India has also indicated its preference to deal with the issue through dialogue and not through measures and countermeasures because it is a fact that all sides engaged in a trade war will eventually lose because it comes at a cost of the growth slowing down under the increasing burden of taxes, and the only gainers in the trade war will be the special interest groups such as the US steel industry, which happens to be a major vote bank for the US president. Further, the US president's rejection of the G7 communique, which endorsed a rule based trading system, suggests that There may be no solution for the present crisis in the near future, but the global powers must try their best to bring an end to the ongoing trade war before it gets out of control. On that note, let's move on to the next issue, which is regarding the worsening of relations between India and Maldives. We discussed how the conduct of polls, the treatment of judiciary, and the imposition of a state of emergency in Maldives was criticized by the Indian government, which resulted in the downslide of the relationship between the two nations, which was further worsened by Chinese involvement in the region. The latest development in this regard is the denial of extension of work visas for Indian workers, and Maldives saying that it will not extend the lease of Indian helicopters or the visas of personnel manning them, which marks a downturn in the defense cooperation between the two countries, which so far had coordinated the maritime and the exclusive economic zone patrols together. In this regard, the Maldivian government has to reconsider these policies, and India too should introspect on why the relations between the two countries has gone sour. Because until a few years ago, Maldives had adopted an India first policy, and India too had supported the near autocratic government run by Mr. Gayoom previously, and India's interventions in Maldives were always aimed at strengthening the government there, and any misgivings were conveyed only through quiet diplomacy. In this regard, it is time for both the countries to restore the bilateral trust. Meanwhile, the Indian government has taken up the issue of visa denials to hundreds of Indian workers and has urged the Maldivian government to abide by the terms of the bilateral visa regime which is in place since 1979. Apart from these issues, there were other important ones like the meeting between the US President and his North Korean counterpart, the outcomes of which will only develop in the days to come, and hence I'll highlight the important developments in the regular analysis video. Also, the Iran nuclear deal was in news for US threatening to withdraw from it, but I have already covered this issue in my previous roundup as well as regular sessions, and I request those who have missed it to go back and watch the same. For now, I'm wrapping up today's news analysis. Do like, share, and comment to support this initiative. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.